Okay, welcome to another iPad painting tutorial. On today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to paint a sunrise over a misty mountain forest scene. Some really nice textures. I'm using the app Procreate on the iPad, but you could probably apply all the things I'm going to show you onto a different tablet using a different app too. But within the app Procreate I've opened a default A4 canvas and I've pre-selected some colours in this section. If you look down in the video description, there is a section that gives you the colour codes, the hexadecimal codes that you can type into this area. So you go to the value section, type them in one at a time here, press enter, the colour will appear up here and then you just tap it into this section and construct it yourself. Or there is a link taking you straight to my Patreon page and you can download the colour file there for free. In terms of the brushes I'm primarily going to be using the airbrushing brushes, the soft brush and the medium brush. But in addition to that, I'm going to be using, within the organic brushes, the rainforest, and then perhaps within the artistic brushes, the leatherwood brush too. So once you've got all those things set up, then you're good to go. If you do have a go at this and you're pleased with your results, there is also in the video description a link to my Instagram and a Facebook group that has over 30,000 members. You can share your work, not just the tutorials, but your own personal work and get feedback from either myself and all the other members of the group, or tag me on Instagram and I will get to respond myself. Okay, with all that said and done, let's get started. So we've got the A4 canvas, we're going to go to our first layer, go to our colours, we're going to select this first colour on the top row, drag it into the canvas, and it flood fills that entire layer. We'll go to our second layer, back to our colours, and we have this second colour along. Go to our brushes, we're going to go to the airbrushing, we're going to go to the soft brush, and we're going to put it at around 10% size and quite low on the opacity, so about 20% opacity. And I'm just going to start bringing in some of this colour in a section, not quite at the very top, but just a little bit down from that point. I'm going to bring a stripe of this all the way across, and I'm doing it in a few layers. It's only at 20%, so I can build it up gradually. Back to our layers. I'm going to keep everything on different layers, so I'm going to create another layer. Back to our colours. We're going to go to the third colour along. We'll keep it at 10% size, but we'll put the opacity up to about 40%. And we're going to go a little bit lower with this one, and we're just going to bring it in. A few stripes of this, so it kind of goes up to the point where it merges with that other colour. So it's going to be strongest near the bottom, so about halfway of our canvas, and then we're just going to have it, a few stripes of it until it disappears into that other colour a little bit. Then we're going to go to our adjustments, our Gaussian blur, and just blur it in to about 20%, like that. Back to our layers, and we'll create another one. Layer 4, back to our colours, and we're going to go for this fourth colour in, which you can see on the colour disc is really quite a strong yellow orange, quite bright. We'll stay on the soft brush, but we're going to reduce it now to about 5%, and we're also going to reduce it down to about 10% opacity, which is really quite low. And I'm just going to start at the very top, bringing in some of this yellow lighter tone at the top of our scene. And then, so where we've got these two colours almost merging, so we've got this slightly darker colour plus this more pink purple colour, we're going to do a few of this yellow stripes in this section. Doesn't have to be terribly neat at this point, it's just background textures. Something like this. Then we'll create another layer, go back to our colours, and we have this dark colour now, which you can see happens to be in the red, but it is very much a greyed out version of it. So we'll stay on the soft brush, we'll turn it even lower to about 3%, and we'll keep it at the 10% opacity. And I'm just going to start bringing in some grey clouds. Now I'm just doing it in taps, I'm pressing quite lightly. And I'm just bringing some of them across onto this side. I can always sharpen them up in a little while, but I'm just doing it very lightly to begin with. In fact, I don't want to go too far across there, so beauty of digital is you can just undo. I think I want to just reserve it over on this side. Maybe it breaks into two as well. Then I'm going to reduce the size to 2%, and I'm going to go over here, again at the point where the two colours seem to merge. I'm going to bring a stripe of cloud over on this side, so I'm allowing this to stretch out. I will go in and tap as well, and build it up in a slightly more fragmented way, but the general sense is that it's a stretched out line. Then it breaks, maybe we've got another piece, maybe we can add some additional fragmented pieces to this as well, slightly less apparent but still there. Maybe we can come over here and add a little bit more. We're doing it really soft, remember, so it's the soft brush at only 10% opacity, so it's really quite subtle and you can build it up gradually. Some sections you might want to create almost like a round motion, so you're getting some round shapes at the top edge. And then I think I'm going to go and create a bigger clump of clouds now. Now, sometimes you'll find as you're doing an element like this that it starts to encroach onto more of the picture than you imagined, but that's fantastic with digital because we've got it all on one layer. So if we decide to squish it or move it at a later point, then we can do that. But I'm going to create a really quite strong section that cuts all the way across now and allow this to build up into a much thicker band of cloud. I'm doing it in stripes and sections though, let it build up gradually. I'm going to turn the opacity up a little bit. I'm going to put it up to 20%, and we can start to just be a little bit more dramatic now, perhaps on that top edge. And let's even turn the size of the brush down to the lower end of 2%. And for that top edge, with a slightly stronger opacity and finer details, we can just create a bit more of a clear edge along the very top of that section. So we're just creating some lumps and bumps along the top part. It's just coming into focus a little bit more. I wouldn't agonize over this too much. I think that sometimes the looser is better. But maybe it's just practice and a little bit of confidence that, enables you to be a bit looser and see when it's working perhaps and when it isn't. So I'm just going to go over some of these shapes now and just create some slightly sharper details in between. And back up to these top sections again, just create a bit more clarity, a bit more focus on these. Now if you do feel like when you've been adding colour to it now it's gone a little bit too sharp and not soft focus enough, it's easy enough to fix. You can go to the adjustments, go to the Gaussian blur, and within this section here you can tap that little arrow and you can go to the pencil setting and you can choose the size of the pencil blur, and I've got it set to about 2% now, and I'll put it up to about 50% strength, and I can just go into those sections. I can blur just those sections in, be a bit more precise. I mean, it's a similar thing to the smudge tool, but it's just a bit softer really. It doesn't push it around as much, it just makes it soft. And then you can go back in with the soft brush again and just choose where you want that clear edge. I'm going to put the brush to 3% size and back down again to about 20%. And I'm going to start bringing more of these big clumps of cloud down into a lower section. And I'm going to do a section here where we've got the sun poking through. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap. Increase it up to 5% and just have this merging down a little bit from that edge. Along here. Now, as I was saying earlier, sometimes we just want to condense what we've got, so I feel like I need to do that because I want the sun to be a little bit higher in the scene. It's encroaching a little bit too low down. So on layer 5, I'm just going to go to my transform tool and it's on freeform. So I'm just going to push it up a little bit and it just will make the sun a little bit higher in the composition. And I feel like I'm just a little bit happier with that. So I'm now going to create another layer. I'm going to put it underneath the previous layer. I'm going to go to my medium brush. I'm going to go to my yellow color. I'm going to put the opacity at 100% and I'm going to put it at about 6% size. And I'm just going to come into this area here. It's going to show through the clouds and that's fine. But I'm just going to set where I want the sun to be in our scene. So perhaps that's a little bit too central. I'm going to push it that way just a little bit. A bit more here. Just tap it in the area a few times. Then we can go to the adjustments, the bloom setting, and we can just turn it up. Well, let's put it 100%, it doesn't really matter. Once you've gone past about 20 odd percent, it creates the same effect anyway. So I'll just put it right to the end, and that automatically creates a really nice glow colour. So I'm going to create another layer, but I'm going to put it underneath layer 6. Go to my colours, I'm going to use this orange colour. We're going to stay on the medium brush, but we're going to put it a bit higher. So we're going to put it at about 12%. Again, still at the 100% opacity. I'm just going to go to the centre of that disc and just tap a few times with that orange. And you can see now you've got that diffused orange all the way around it. Now bear in mind, we've got an area of grey cloud that goes in front. We're going to return to that and just start to make that make a bit more sense now. So on that basis, I'm going to go back up to layer 5, which has this grey cloud, back to my colours, this grey colour, back to my soft brush, which was at 5% size, and I'm going to put it at 20% opacity. And I'm just going to start building up some more of this colour over the top. Now, I want to create a little bit of a sharper edge here. So the way that I'm going to do that is with the eraser. I'm going to put it on the medium brush for the eraser, and I'm going to reduce it down to the lower end of 2%, and we'll keep it at about 80%. And I'm just going to go in there now and remove bits of the cloud feature. So we're just creating a slightly nicer edge along here, especially as we go along nearer the sun. So now we have that edge. I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to go to my yellow colour again with the soft brush. I'm going to put the soft brush down to 2% size and 20% opacity. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and we're just going to go along this edge. I'm just going to create a slightly yellowing along that very line, like that. I reduce it down a little bit further, in fact, just to be a bit more precise. Something like this. Then we're going to go to the orange, which is third in from the right. Keep it at the same setting, so 2% size and 20% opacity. And I'm just going to push into the shapes here a little bit with this orange colour. Just create a little bit of a sharper edge detail with this orange. Then I'm going to just increase it up to about 3% size, and just below that, lightly create this radiant glow, so it's kind of merging together. But I don't want to overdo that. Okay, so you can zoom out and you can see the effect now. It's starting to pull together. So now I'm going to go back to this colour, which was this lighter orange colour. It's not yellow, it's more of a light orange. And on this same layer, so layer 8, I'm going to be using the soft brush at the lower end of 2% size, and again, still at 20% opacity. And I'm just going to use it now to define some sharp edges, especially along this cloud, because it's really picking up a highlight from the sun. So just make sure it's really at the lowest part of 2%, and just move along and create an edge. So that goes for the top edge of this cloud that is immediately obscuring the sun, but also the bottom edge of any clouds that are immediately above it as we're looking as well. And then we can also just create some streaks in that area too. Okay, so I'm going to go back to layer 4. I'm going to continue using this colour, which is 4th in, with the soft brush at about 5% size and 10% opacity. And I'm just going to build in a little bit of this lighter colour into this region too. So not too much, just a little bit here and there. Maybe even reduce it down a bit further, 2%, just for some extra lines and textured bits coming in here. Okay. So I'm going to go to my top layer and create another layer. Back to my colours. Now I've used up to about this point, but I'm now going to use this colour, which is the 6th from the left, with the soft brush. I'm going to put it up to about 10% size and keep it low opacity at about 10%. So we're on the very top layer now, layer 9, and I'm just going to build a few stripes of this across this region. This is going to be just softens it into the cooler colours now that we're going to start using for the land features. So I'm just going to do a few bands of this. It really will just merge them together. Okay, so we're going to create another layer again. Back to our colours. Now we've not used that colour yet. We may come back and use that, but I'm going to move straight onto this layer. So we've got the first colour on the middle row, which is this nice blue colour. We're going to go to our medium brush. We're going to put it at about 3% size, and we'll keep it at 100% opacity, why not? And I'm going to start building in my mountains here. So the distant features this time. Now I've done it at 100% opacity, but I can always soften it in. That isn't a problem. I'm pretty sure we're going to do that in a moment or two, but we'll just build it in, cutting it all the way across to begin with. And then we can always increase it as well and just fill in that bottom section. Now the properties of these layers are going to be changed as we go later on, so I'm going to start with the strongest version of them and then we'll start to subdue and make them work a bit better later on. So I'm going to create another layer, go to my colours, I'm going to go to the second colour along now. I'm going to put the brush still on the medium brush, medium airbrush, and 3% size, and again 100% opacity. And I'm just going to build a section in here. It doesn't matter really, you can always adjust and change it later. And I can then drag into the remaining space and just flood fill and just tidy it up. Create a new layer. Back to my colours, I'm going to go for the third colour. And again, I'm just going to build it in to a section here. Drag and fill that layer. Create a new layer, go back to my colours, fourth colour in. And again, same properties, same idea. And just bring another range of hills and things across here. And fill, create another layer, back to my colours, use the fifth colour along now, and do the same thing over here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go back through the layers and use this colour, which has got a really nice soft mist colour, which will be really beneficial just to subdue those elements. So back to layer 10, now I'm just going to add this light colour to the very bottom, and I've added this lighter grey fog, but looking at it now, I kind of feel like the top edge of that mountain isn't quite dark enough. So sometimes this happens, despite picking the colours in advance and practicing, it still doesn't seem to work. So one thing I can do to adjust that is just make it a bit darker. So on that layer, so we're on layer 10, I'm going to go to my adjustments, my hue, saturation and brightness. I'm just going to darken it up a little bit, and I think I'm happier with that. So I've just reduced it down to 46%, and I think that works better. So we're on layer 10 still. I'm still on this lighter grey, and I'm just with 5% size and 10% opacity now building in some more of this low-lying mist. And I think I'm happy with the contrast there now. I think that works better. Okay, so I'm going to do the same on layer 11, which is this layer here. And again, on a really low opacity, in fact, I'm going to turn it even lower to about 5%. I'm just going to build in a lighter section in this bottom area, and it just cuts across, just takes away that bottom edge, maybe even a little bit up there, not as much, but certainly as it comes lower down into this section, you want to just chip away at that darker colour, and then you can go back up to layer 12, do something similar with that. Maybe we'll just increase the size of the brush to 7% and just take away from that bottom edge a little bit. Go back up to layer 13, do something similar here. And then up to layer 14 as well. We'll do something just a little bit here. Okay, so just going back through my layers now, I feel like there's some of the layers that perhaps I just need to tidy up those edges. So I will start with my layer 14 here at the front, and I'm going to go to my smudge tool. I'm going to put my smudge tool on my organic rainforest brush, and I'm going to put it down to about 3% size and 80% opacity. And I'm just going to use that now to soften the edge as we go along here. But let's put it up to 100% opacity and just reduce it a little bit more, so the top end of 2%, and I'm just using it to disrupt that very edge, just create a softer, more organic look, like it could be the trees. And I'm going to do the same with layer 13, but I'm going to reduce it down even further, so the lower end of 2%, Now you can also use this to just redefine the shapes if you feel that you're not happy with the overall form. In fact, I'm going to perhaps just push this up a little bit higher in general. I mean, you know, we've got a textured brush now, so we really can just be quite liberal with this. Keep pushing it up towards that top edge. It doesn't really mess anything up. It actually looks really good. Then we can go back to layer 12 and we could do something similar with that, but I would reduce it now down even further to the top end of 1%. As we get further away, it's going to have a smaller impact, smaller shapes. So I'm just pushing upwards. So it is the smudge tool, so you have to move what's already there a little bit. So I'm taking the colour that's there and pushing it upwards. In fact, I'm going to reduce it even further, so lower on the 1%, because it's a distant feature, so it needs to be a little bit smaller, that texture. So flatten it out a little bit more. Layer 11 on the smudge tool, just the really lower end of 1%, and we're just affecting some tiny shifts. We don't want to do too much, just keep it subtle. And then for the very distant ones, you're really not going to need to do hardly anything at all, so not worth doing it. If you are going to do anything for the distant ones, I would go to the airbrushing medium brush and use that instead, and just reduce it down to, again, the 1%. And if you want to just very occasionally, just subtly add some textured elements using that, it's a little bit more subtle. And then obviously we've got layer 10, which is so distant that honestly I wouldn't bother really doing anything on there. Okay, so we'll go back to layer 14 again, go back to our colours, and we're not going to use these vibrant greens, we're going to use the one slightly back from that. So we've got this colour, which is the 5th colour along. Again, we're going to be using the rainforest brush, and we're going to have to use it on quite a low opacity, it's about 10%, and small texture, so the top end of 2%, and we're just going to start bringing in some of this texture into this foreground area. So we're bringing it in tufts. In fact, let's even reduce it further, so probably the lower end of 2%, and maybe a little bit stronger, put it up to 20% opacity. Sometimes you just got a trial and error, and I'm just bringing in, I'll show you in this section, so if I turn the opacity up, so I'm bringing in these kind of shapes. So we're suggesting the kind of shapes that we need, but I'm doing it quite loose, quite subtly, so about 20% or so. We're building up these textured layers. Now you can afford to have some sections that almost band together in like a line, a stripe that runs through, but generally I'd keep it quite broken as a texture. So there'll be some sections where you get maybe an elongated area that really almost bands together as a stripe or a line, but generally speaking I would keep it quite rough. Okay, so we'll go back up a layer, or back down a layer rather, so we're on layer 13, that layer there, go to our colours, and we've got that colour, but we've also got a slightly darker version, so I'm going to use that version, it's a bit more subtle, and maybe turn the opacity up to about 30%. So again, we're at the lower end of 2%, and I'm just going to build some of that texture into this section now, and I'm doing smaller shapes and deliberately keeping that texture a little bit smaller. So lots of that same shape I was showing you before. The brush itself does help, but it still is a little bit time consuming, so be prepared to put the time in. And we've got another layer, layer 12, so we'll go to that layer and let's have a look at our colours. We have another colour here, which is the third in, and if we just test that out, It's a little bit strong on the opacity, so I'm just going to reduce that to about 15% strength. And again, now this really needs to be subtle, so you're only doing really small, almost just points of texture. I wouldn't really try and do too many shapes. We're just building up slight subtle texture here now. So there's lots of points really. And again, we can do the same on layer 11, so we'll go to that layer and let's have a look at our colours. We've got one further back here, it's even more subtle, so we'll put it up to 20% and just have a go at doing a few elements of that. You'll barely notice that now, so don't worry too much. It's just a hint of it really. And that's built the general textured effect, but we can push it a little bit further. I think I'm going to build something in more foreground here. So we're going to go to the top of our layers, create another layer, back to our colours. I'm going to use this black colour and we'll stay on the rainforest initially. We'll put it up to about 4% size and about 50% opacity. And I'm just building in something here that's very much more foreground, and maybe I'll just build it in on this side too. Doesn't really have to be much of it, just a little bit. Then I'm going to go to my artistic brush, my leatherwood brush, go back to my colours, and I'm going to go with these lighter colours. So I'm going to go with this green on the very end. It's a darker green. I'm going to put it down to about 2% size and about 50% opacity, and let's see what that looks like. Now it's a subtle texture, you're barely going to notice it, and that's what I want initially. I'm just building some of that in, just here and there with the leatherwood brush. Back to my colours, I've got this even lighter green, and then again, we'll just layer some of this texture in here a little bit. I'm being very light-handed with this, I don't want to do too much. I'm just building in suggestion of what it is when it's really foreground, and then we'll go to the lightest green. Again, all of this on the same layer. Perhaps I'll just reduce this down a little bit to the lowest possible part of 2%, and then maybe even low on the opacity, so we'll put that down to about 20%, and just lightly start to build in some of this green. Just a hint of it, just a suggestion, so we really know what colour the actual forest is meant to be. If it weren't for the atmospheric conditions, we can actually see the vibrancy of that green showing through now, and I think it helps put everything else in context. You know what the colours should be, therefore you know now what the atmosphere is actually doing and how it's impacting on everything else. Now we've got layer 10, if I zoom out over this section, which is over here, and we've got layer 11. Now I feel that somehow there's a strange area here that perhaps we could go something kind of in the middle. So we'll go back to our colours. Layer 10 was using this colour, and the next layer was this colour. So we'll go to this darker colour, but we could just add a couple of features in with a much lighter, more subdued version of it. So we'll do it on layer 10. We'll go to the airbrushing and the medium brush. We'll put it at 3% size and about 40% opacity. And with this second colour along, I can just start building in some features here, some extra layers that perhaps we didn't have there initially. So I can just create some more subtle features, and I can go over it again because I only pressed once, and I can create another one. So again, it's at that lower opacity, so we can create another couple of layers if we want, and then a third time as well. And then you can see you've really created more sense of layers. Now I am going to go back through the layers using this colour on the very end and the soft brush again. I'm going to go through my layers, and I'm really going to start to ramp up that mist effect. So I'm going to turn it down because we want to be a bit more controlled on this section. So about 3% size and 10% opacity. And I can really just be a bit more precise for these ones and just put it exactly where I need it to be. But then when we come to layer 11, which was this one, I'm going to be a little less precise. I'm going to put it up to about 3% and just start to add a bit more of the mist into this section. We can really add more, and it can obscure some of this as well. Then quickly we'll go up to layer 12, and it's going to be in this section now, so it's just going to be a low-lying mist in this area. A little less of it, because as it gets further away, it's going to condense and it's going to get thicker, but as it gets nearer to us, it's going to be a bit more subtle. So I'm just adding a lighter sense of it over here. Back up to layer 13, which, just to double check, you understand where we are on this layer. So I can perhaps have a nice pool of it in this area, almost. So we'll put it up to about 5% size, still on the 10% opacity. Maybe we could just have it, collecting in this area, a bit more mist. And the more we add it here, the more it's going to define the edge of the next layer as well, which is the beauty of adding it. So I'm doing a nice circular motion just to emphasize and bring these out. I can also make this little section a bit more distant so it pushes away. And then back up another layer, layer 14 is here. And I'm just going to subtly build it into the bottom section here so it kind of merges with what we have there. So not too much of that. Now, as I was showing you before, it's never too late to just push some of these elements around. So I'm going to go to the organic brush, the rainforest brush. I'm going to have it set quite small at 2%, but quite strong at 100%. And I can just expand some of these sections. If I feel like I just want to continue to modify some of these shapes, it really is possible to continue to adjust these as long as you're on the right layer. So that was layer 12, let's go to layer 13. If I just move that across. Yeah, I'm happy with most of that layer, but still I can continue to push it and just play around with elements if I feel I want to. I'm going to go back to my sky layer, so on layer 9 in fact will do for this. Go back to my colours. I'm going to go to this orange colour. On my soft brush, I'm going to put it at about 6% size and 10% opacity and just bring in a little bit more of the orange colour just on the bottom area of layer 9. Not too much, just a hint. And then also perhaps this colour, which is the 6th colour along, and maybe just a little bit more of that as well. Mix the two together, and then just a hint of white, I think. So I'm going to go to that colour. I'm going to put it so low you'll hardly see the difference. I'm going to put it 2% size, and I'm just going to bring that in a little bit on the bottom edge there too. Going to go back to the orange colour again, still on the soft brush, put it at 2% size, a little bit higher, so 20% opacity, and just some fine tuning for the sky. So as I was doing before, just bringing out some of these edges where I feel that the sunlight will just be catching. So I want to make sure it's at the really lower end of 2% or even at the 1%, and just have it catching here and there. So I'm using this orange yellow, but I can also use my other colours. So I've got this first orange, which you'll see stands out compared to some of the other colours now. So we can use that still just to bring out the highlights along the very edges where we feel is required. Okay, I'm going to leave that particular tutorial here at this point. I hope you've enjoyed following along. If you have, make sure to share your results with me, either on Instagram by tagging me or join the Facebook group there. Make sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification button and a thumbs up if you've liked it, and I shall catch you back here soon. See you later.